All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talkin Investing. You're here with Tom, and we also have George with us, as always, today.
Hello.
We got a lot of good stuff today. A lot of good stuff to go through. This was actually a good week. Last month, very quietly, very sneaky. Last month was actually a really good month. You know, the news cycle might have been awful. There was a lot of gloom and doom talk, but we're gonna look at some numbers that are really, I think they signal, you know, we've been talking about the bottoming out process, and I think everybody's going to be happy with what they see when they take a look, and hopefully it's showing up in your portfolios. And today was another mostly green day. We finished off of our highs. We pulled back a little bit from our highs, but there were most of the Bitcoin miners were green. 3 were in the red, but just barely, all less than 1%. A couple were up 7 or 8%. Riot was up 7.98%. That was the leader on the day and the week, I believe. BitDeer was up 7.76%. So we had a lot of good stuff going on. And Bitcoin's up. It's at 97,000 essentially right now. And, you know, we were at 84,000 like 2 weeks ago. So this has been a very strong run. While everybody's screaming the sky is falling, I just feel like what's happening, and this is always what happens, you know, when the fear is at its peak. And if you go back and watch our previous live streams, we've been pounding the table with this. It's like it just you know, there's nothing's guaranteed in life, but it never seems to fail. You know, the more people are gloom and doom, the more you can almost be assured you're about to have a big rebound. And Bitcoin had a big rebound. The equity markets had a very big rebound. We're just a little bit off of our all-time highs, and you wouldn't think so. You know, people were talking about, are we in a bear market or a crash? And, you know, if we have a good week next week, we'll be in our all-time highs.
Think it's going to be sell in May and go away?
Good question, George. I actually have an article of somebody who's said the sell in May and go away is a big conversation right now, but this could be the exception. So that's a great question. Maybe we should do a poll first, and then we'll go through that article and see what this person had to say about that, because, you know, all those conventional wisdom type things are a little bit hit or miss. You know, when they're right, you can say, oh, see, you should have sold in May and gone away. And then, but there's exceptions to every rule, and there's big exceptions. So, you know, this falls under the same category. We always tell people, don't ever trade on one data point. Don't ever trade on one, that's one old saying, sell in May and go away. Like, you can consider it as a part of your entire picture of due diligence, but no one thing is ever going to give you the right answer. If it did, then we'd all be rich. So, life is like a box of chocolates.
You never know what you get.
That you lost the cheat sheet for. Otherwise, you just look at the thing and...
Or you think it's upside down and it's not.
Exactly.
That's the one that always gets.
Miner Deegan is saying, Tom, I disagree. The miners continue their decay against Bitcoin. We're going to look at a chart comparing what the miners did against Bitcoin last week and what they did against Bitcoin in the month of April. And I think you're going to be encouraged. Now, again, it's not across the board. We've been talking about in 2024, we said there'd be winners and losers. In 2025, I think there'll be varying degrees of winners. I think this is going to be a better year by far for the Bitcoin miners than 24 was, but still, some are going to do better than others. There's just no doubt about it. So we're going to get to those charts very soon. I just want to wait for some people to show up. If you guys could be so kind and hit the like button, it does help the live stream out in real time. We are really having so momentum, and I'm going to get to some of these charts next, and then we'll get to George's go in May and go away in May and
sell in May and go away.
Thank you. Those are the words I was looking for. So let's get that poll up right now. And again, if you could hit the like button, we're going for 100 likes. It also helps get people here in real time. And I have some articles on this. The retail sector has just lost all interest in Bitcoin miners, and I think they're making a big, big, big mistake. And for as much as we've run up recently, which I'm going to show you, I think there's a monumental amount of room to the upside. I am a bull on Bitcoin and still on, the right Bitcoin miners. And there's one Bitcoin miner that I'm going to kick off the list today. So we're going to talk about that. There's a couple of reasons for it, and they filed something with the SEC that makes me say it's time for them to be off our list and no longer be considered a Bitcoin miner. So I think we're following like 11 or 12 or something like that. So we'll take a look at the list and we'll tell you which one I'm talking about. Pogo, that's right. That could twist an ankle. You never know. Could cut through the skin. MicroStrategy to 20K. Year to date, MicroStrategy has bought almost 2x of the new mining supply. Price will go up. They came out with earnings. They came out with a plan that blows me away on how much more they're going to buy. And I'm super conflicted about that company because, they have a massive amount of debt and convertible debt. They do a massive amount of stock dilution, but they also have more than 500,000 Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin does do what we think it's going to do in the next 5 or 10 years, that could be the biggest win of them all. They could be one of the, they could be $1 trillion company. I think if you're looking at these companies, MicroStrategy has more of a long-term strategy, and I think the Bitcoin miners will be more volatile long-term, just because of the Bitcoin economics that they're subject to. Certain parts of the cycle are much better and worse, and then they have to withstand a halving every 4 years, so I would call these long-term swing trades, multiple-year long-term swing trades, in my opinion. That's how I'm treating these.
I'm going to answer your question, Pogo. I have not bought anything. I've been deep in programming land. I don't like programming. I pull my hair out. I haven't even looked. I was hoping for a little bit of a pullback, but I don't know if it's going to happen before June. So what do we got? 4 weeks ago. I'm working on putting together my own crypto exchange.
All right, so let's post this poll. Question: do you think this is a, quote, sell in May and go away situation that we're in right now? And I'm talking about for Bitcoin, altcoins, and I guess the market overall. Is it time to get out? Did we just get a good run and now it's time to get out, or have we only just begun?
So, it's May 2nd, and my answer is going to change throughout this month. Right now, it's not time, but if we get a 30% pump this month, Tom, it might be time for me to get out, at least in the Bitcoin miners for a little bit.
If we get that kind of big pump.
Yeah, if we get a 30, so I'm looking for, my answer would be yes, all right, with a 30% pump from here. Because that's quick. But
yeah,
then again,
and that's coming off of what you're going to see as a good month. I want to get to Jeff. Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for the super chat. Is there any CleanSpark quarterly reporting preview / advice? Those supermarkets are still running. Jeff has had the multiple year winning trade on the supermarkets. There's no doubt about it. It's good to see you. And Jeff said, I wish I could be more active. Well, I'm glad you're able to make it with us today here And I'll tell you, Riot just came out with their quarterly numbers, and their stock was on fire today. I believe CleanSpark has been doing everything that they said they were going to do, everything that they're supposed to do. I don't see any surprise coming out of the CleanSpark earnings report. So I don't see any reason why anybody should be afraid of that report. So there's some of these companies that I don't, their plans are a little less clear. They do a little less forecasting and that kind of stuff. But I think we know right where CleanSpark's at. And I think pretty much all their monthly operational updates, in my opinion, all year have been an A. So, I'm holding. There's been, CleanSpark's still only at $8.81. I was able to buy some with a 6 handle on it, and probably a lot of you took advantage of that opportunity when it was in the high 6s just a few weeks ago. So, but I'll tell you, if not for the fact that it was just there, I would look at CleanSpark at $8.81 and think, man, there's just nothing but upside to this. I considered 12 a floor that I thought it would hold. Obviously, that was grossly incorrect, and the market can do that. These numbers, in my opinion, are irrational, but the market not only can be irrational, it's infamous for being irrational. And so when they beat these stocks down, they beat them down. But the reverse is also true. We'll look at some charts and show you how quickly, when these come back, they come back fast. So I'm just, for me, not financial advice, but I'm just holding my CleanSpark. I added a bunch on that Tuesday a couple of weeks ago when, it felt clear to me that was capitulation, especially in the Bitcoin mining sector. And that's when I did my buying, and I feel good about it. So thank you, Jeff. Let's see how your poll is going, George. Oh, my.
At 30%, Tom, I'm still not back. I'm barely back to the number that I said I never want to go below.
Even if it runs up 30%. That's what I'm saying. That's how ridiculously low these numbers are right now. I'll give you 3 stocks that, and again, stock price doesn't really have anything to do with anything. It's somewhat arbitrary. It's a function of the number of shares of stock that are outstanding. So what you want to look at more is market cap versus value. But I'm going to give you 3 companies: Riot and CleanSpark and Iron. Those 3 companies have traded inside of a range where they've passed and fell behind each other. And right now, CleanSpark's at $8.81, Riot's at $8.39, and Iron's down at $6.53. Now, all 3 of those companies do have different business models, but they're pretty similar in exahash. There were times where their stocks were all almost the same number. To me, all 3 of those, in the Iron in the 6s, CleanSpark and Riot in the 8s, and CleanSpark was in the 6s. I got some of that as well. So, I mean, I there's not one stock on this board where I look at it and go, oh, that one's really had too much of a run. I'd be worried about that. I think the opposite is true.
I would need to go up 50%, Tom, to think about going away. Not, I'm in for the long, bumpy road.
And that's, you guys know, that's what I'm in it for. And it has been a long and bumpy and brutal road. And at Bitcoin 97,000, for these companies to be trading where they're at is still crazy time. So I don't know. I haven't bought since really since that Tuesday a couple of weeks ago. That was just, when they were just basically giving, it feels like they were giving shares away. Bitfarms was in the 67-cent range or something like that. It was just crazy.
Is there a way to reduce your exposure by going with options? Sell the stock and go into an option?
You're saying getting rid of the stocks. There's a way to have less money at risk and get the same amount of potential upside, but it's a much higher risk equation. Because if things don't go the way you plan and your timing is wrong on options, you can lose all your money. Right? With the stock, at least you're still always going to own the stock if you choose to. If you choose to sell and take a loss, then you can. With an options, you're not given that choice. If you buy a January 2026 option, on January whatever, somewhere in the middle of January, that thing's gone. So if the company didn't do what you hoped it would do in that time frame, then you lose all your money. And I do think options are very, if you're familiar, I would say crawl before you walk before you run. But if you're familiar with options, there's good opportunities to buy and sell options. But you got to know, you got to practice, you got to know, and you got to be careful, and you got to understand that it's massively more risk than just owning stock straight up.
Waffles, I'm going to answer. I'm not going to answer. I'm going to see if Tom will answer it. He said, Larry, how high do you think Mara will go? Because Larry has. I agree, Tom. I expect these stocks to be at least 30. At least 30.
Yeah, and how far do I think?
Mara.
Marathon?
Yeah.
I mean, short term. I mean, the short term guessing game is very difficult for me. But Marathon is one of the stocks. I will answer the question. Marathon is one of the many stocks that I think in the medium term will at least double, and before the run is over, I think should at least triple. Getting back to its all-time high, which I think was around 83, I don't know if it's going to do that or not. It depends on what Bitcoin does, but it's still, 42 is a double. If it gets halfway back to where it was, sorry, that's a triple.
What do you think Bitcoin needs to be at for Mara to do a triple?
I think Bitcoin needs to break out above its previous all-time high and maybe take that run from 108 and change up to 120. And I think you'll get a big move when we get back to our previous all-time high, and then another big move, when we take that next $10,000 or $12,000 jump up to 120,000. All of which I think is coming. And now remember, some people think we're not getting to 120,000. So if that's what you think.
Do you think that if the United States government decides that they're going to buy, I heard $100 billion worth of BTC in the next 5 years, what does that do to the price of Bitcoin, do you think?
If the U.S. government buys $100 billion worth of Bitcoin, I mean, the buying pressure that puts, and even over a 5-year period, obviously the further down the line you get, the less percent that is as the price of Bitcoin increases. But that puts a massive amount of buying pressure on Bitcoin. So, if they were to do that evenly over a 5-year period, I think the biggest period that it would have an effect is year one. And I think it would cause Bitcoin to double.
Oh, double?
Yeah.
Wow. And so if they, that would kind of, 180-ish. Yeah, that kind of. And how quickly do you think that will happen? Let's say that announces. Do you think it's going to front run?
I think once we start seeing purchases, because that's kind of what happened with the ETFs. It got a little boost when they got approved. And once we started seeing, hey, this adoption is real, right? We peaked in like March. So that took a month and a half for people to trust that, yep, this is really happening. And that was a gigantic catalyst. That sent Bitcoin up, massively. And so, the U.S. government making that kind of commitment, or, and don't forget, it's not just the U.S. government. There's governments all around the world. There are other countries with massive economies that are interested in getting into the Bitcoin game. And I didn't keep the article open, but Arizona passed legislation. So there's 50 states in the United States. Obviously, some of them are 20 times bigger than other ones as far as wealth and population. But Arizona passed legislation to create its own Bitcoin reserve. So I think you'll see over the next 2, 3, 4 years, at least half the states in the United States create, in addition to the federal Bitcoin reserve, that each states are going to create their own reserve.
Well, and then I would imagine that's going to make other countries.
Right. Once the United States starts buying, other countries will follow. That's why I'm saying we're still, it seems at Bitcoin 100,000-ish, it feels like we've run so far, there's just no room left. But if you listen to people like Cathie Wood and Michael Saylor and Tom Lee, now I just named 3 of the biggest cheerleaders of all time for Bitcoin, but they're talking about Bitcoin getting to 2 million and then 5 million and then 20 million of Bitcoin, over a 5, 10, 15, 20, 30-year period. So there's an awful lot of room left to the upside if you're a long-term investor in Bitcoin itself. So, for me, and I do hold through the ETFs, a bunch of my Bitcoin investments are in the Bitcoin ETFs. And I think that's a forever investment versus the Bitcoin miners that ultimately I do have an exit strategy on the Bitcoin miners, but I don't really have an exit strategy on Bitcoin.
No, I think it's a generational.
My strategy on Bitcoin is if we get big pullbacks or if somehow we even get a bear market or something all the way that resembles a crypto winter, I will double, triple, quadruple down. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we'll get bear markets. Bitcoin is going to start to act like, let me find this article.
Well, I think that you're seeing an immediate pump by a dump after that, and then, like a dead cat bounce, and then it will go back up. I think a lot of people get out. I think, what I mean, just to mess with people.
Yeah, for sure.
Sell the news event. And who was it? Robbie Rose. I agree with you. I don't know if there's any gold in Fortnite. And have you noticed that's went away? No one even talks about that anymore.
I know.
I've been saying that. I've been screaming that for years.
We'll do that poll, old jock. So it looks like most people are not in the mood to sell in May and go away right now. This was 80-20. It's funny. Our polls are either 80-20 or 50-50. It's wild. It never fails. So thank you for voting. And by the way, we're at 38 likes. If you guys would be so kind to smash the like button, it does help out the live stream in real time. And if you're watching it later, it still helps. You can still smash the like button and help the channel. It's free and it is much appreciated.
I have become fascinated with China. Not just like a little bit, like a ton. Like, that's all I watch, China news. And the propaganda that they're putting on. When you actually, like, there's a channel called China Observer. That's a YouTube channel. I recommend people watch that. They have an app called Bill, and we have a embed. It's called embedeasy.com. If
All right.
Ever wants to embed their videos on Discord. And we do Bill in the censorship that's a Chinese app, if anybody probably don't know. What they're doing, how they're censoring everything going on over there, it's unbelievable. It is, I mean, these malls are freaking ghost towns. It's scary. No different than the United States in the malls here, But it's just scary. Sorry. I don't like to scream in the mic.
the world's economy is, the way things are happening is changing. The world's economy is changing. I got a story I didn't even tell you about, George, because I'm saving it. It's for you. Something you've been screaming about. And I got one for you that's coming up. I want to get to Jeff. Thank you again, Jeff. Could you say some of the idea of runaway Bitcoin to the millions is based on the death of currency? Bitcoin valued at 5 million US dollars. Where would money supply be? So there's, I mean, yes, right. For Bitcoin to get to 5 million or 10 million or 20 million dollars, either it's because we've gone through generations of massive inflation, or Bitcoin is taking some part of the place of currency. I don't know how high it would have to get in order to become, the world's currency. I think it would really have to be quite high, in my opinion, to replace the US dollar as the world's currency. But I think it can be competition. Maybe there's more than one thing that's happening, and Bitcoin is happening. Cryptocurrency is happening. I'm going to bring up this article, and just, Jeff, it kind of ties into what you're saying. This is Kevin O'Leary. You guys probably many of you know Kevin O'Leary, or Mr. Wonderful, as they call him. He said, crypto will be the 12th sector of the economy. Well, in my opinion, he's a little late on that call. I think we're already there. Crypto is the 12th sector of the economy. We haven't added a sector to the economy in 100 years. So this is a game changer. So ahead of Consensus 2025, the investor and TV personality shares his crypto portfolio strategy, why he won't touch Bitcoin ETFs, and what could unleash trillions into digital assets. So one thing I wanted to show was he did disclose he has a 19% allocation of his wealth in cryptocurrency. That's massive. I don't think you're going to see that level of adoption from most very wealthy people. That if you did, then you're going to get to Bitcoin 5 million a lot faster than I thought. But, obviously he's into crypto, and, he opened, I think he's part of an owner of an exchange in Canada, if I remember correctly. So, he's highly knowledgeable on all this stuff, but this represents kind of being all in. This is an extremely heavy allocation into crypto. And I think it's, it's like he's talking about. This is kind of a crypto, the 12th sector. Crypto's here to stay, and it's only going to get bigger. It's already gotten, it's gone from 1 penny to $97,000 in 15 years. So where's it going in the next 15? I don't think it's going to follow that trajectory, and we've seen it slow down, but it could easily get to $1 million, $5 million, $10 million. I don't think to discount the possibility of it getting to those numbers over the next 20 years.
And plus, Tom, nobody else is, we live and breathe it. Everybody on this channel lives and breathes, pretty much crypto and Bitcoin miners. But the majority of people don't even know what crypto is.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the things I was going to talk about later, but I'm going to drag it in right now. What in the heck is Vanguard doing? They have $11 trillion, and they don't let their people buy the Bitcoin ETFs. So there's just forget everything else in the whole world. There's $11 trillion on the sideline at Vanguard, while their direct competitor, BlackRock, has the most successful ETF, the fastest growing ETF. And by the way, it's not by a little bit. It's by many, many multiples. The fastest growing ETF in the history of all ETFs is their Bitcoin ETF. They're all in on Bitcoin, and Vanguard won't even let their customers buy it. That is a failed strategy. They're either going to, this has gone on way longer than I expected, and it's going to cause a shift, because we're going to reach a point where if you don't have 1 or 2 or 3%, the old rule of thumb, you got to have 10%, or you should have 10% of your money in gold. For 100 years, that was the rule of thumb. Well, there's going to be a rule of thumb. Like, you got to have exposure to digital currency. And if you've got a major institution like Vanguard, which really BlackRock and Vanguard are by far the two biggest money managers in the world. One of them's all in on cryptocurrency, and the other one won't let you participate on it. So that's one $11 trillion fund, and I'll give you another one because I did come across an ad.
And that has to switch soon, Tom. I mean, that's going to switch, especially if they announce the reserve.
Right. It just baffles me that they've gone. It's been over a year now. I mean, I'm looking for another article that relates to.
But do you think price would go down Bitcoin if Satoshi's wallet gets activated and coins start getting moved?
I think there would be some kind of short-term shock to the system if that happened. I think right now it is assumed that wallet is inactive from now until the end of time, and those Bitcoin are out of circulation. So I do think it would be short-lived, but I think there would be, one of those knee-jerk panic reactions that we always tend to get when stuff happens, and that would be a big deal. I mean, it would be.
Jeff, I think Satoshi's comes relevant at $1 million. I think they stop talking about Bitcoin, they go to sats.
So I'm going to put up a poll that old Jock, who is a longtime member of the channel, recommended. Let's see what people think about this. Because obviously this is kind of one of the headline news stories right now. Who's going to quote Blink first on trade?
How do you do yes or no?
Oh, are you kidding me? I'm going to get rid of this. End the poll. Going to redo it. Yes.
Yes, I was right again.
You're automatically right that way. Give me 1 second. I'll get this back up. Okay. And obviously, we're all just guessing. And the other hard part's going to be, I'm going to give my cop-out answer right now, but I truly believe this. I think both countries have to save face, and they're going to find a way to move forward on trade. I think they're going to be one of the last ones to make a trade deal with the United States, but they're going to find a way to move forward so that both sides can claim that the other side is the one that blinked first. It's going to be in my opinion, it's going to be ambiguous. In my opinion, I think the United States is in a stronger position in this negotiation, but it's not good for either country right now. So it's a situation that's got to get resolved, in my opinion. Old Jock in a Vanguard down by the river. Yeah, they're just not keeping up. And let me go to this other article that kind of... Morgan Stanley eyes launching a crypto trading through E-Trade. This from Bloomberg. So, whereas BlackRock and Vanguard are the first and second largest money managers in the world, Morgan Stanley's the fifth largest money manager in the world. And through E-Trade, they're going to give, $3 trillion worth of money access to buying. It looks like they're going to start next year, and they're going to start with Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I don't know how extensive the rollout will be. But this is massive adoption, this announcement. And this came out yesterday. Like, people don't even notice or care about these, but there's so many multi-trillion-dollar pools of money that have yet to invest their first dollar in cryptocurrency. So this is why I am bullish. And there's nothing, all signs ahead. We'll take a look at what the U.S. government is doing and has done, but all signs are pointing towards, just an across-the-board acknowledgement that this is happening. And, you know, the United States has aggressively been discussing, we'll throw a few articles up about that. They aggressively want to not only hold the most Bitcoin, but mine the most Bitcoin of any country in the world. So they're pursuing that on both fronts, which is another reason I'm optimistic on the Bitcoin miners. I think they will give incentives to the Bitcoin miners. This narrative will have flipped 180 degrees from the, in my opinion, somewhat false ESG narrative that was going on for years to understanding that a lot of these Bitcoin miners, by being vertically integrated like they are actually supporting the grid, and they're a necessary addition to the United States grid. In addition to the fact that I think it's just going to be considered, I have an article where they called it the space, you know, it's the next space race. White House confirms global, quote, space race to accumulate Bitcoin. U.S. government signals imminent purchase. So this has not been confirmed by the White House. On April 29, 2025, a significant statement from the White House sent shockwaves through the cryptocurrency market, as reported by Crypto Rover on Twitter. The White House allegedly declared that there is a space race among countries to accumulate Bitcoin, with indications that the United States might soon engage in purchasing the leading cryptocurrency. This statement, shared via a tweet with an accompanying image, triggered an immediate market response. So this is not necessary. We don't know how much, who, when, where, why, but you know, there's growing. It's becoming growingly, evidently clear that this is something that's happening. So, you know, you've got them all in on buying Bitcoin. I don't know if I saved the article about what they're doing for the Bitcoin miners. I don't think I have that one up right now.
When did that article come out? The 29th?
This came out. This is, yeah, it looks like April 29th at 5:30. U.S. solidifying itself as Bitcoin mining hub. So this was an article on Fox News. This might have been up as much as a week ago. I don't see a date on this. Bitcoin miners are rapidly finding their way to the United States and putting down roots, with U.S. capturing 75.4% of activity in North America, according to a new report, especially as firms exit China. So we're seeing the growth. I mean, we see the reports. The big publicly traded companies are growing and growing. Cambridge did put out a new digital mining industry report. They had a previous report that was extremely negative about Bitcoin mining. Extremely negative. This one is very different than that. It talks about how green the space is getting. It's, according to them, 52% renewable energy. I think that it's probably a lot more than that. The amount of coal is down to, you know, almost zero in this space to mine Bitcoin. So I think you're going to see a push for the U.S. to both buy the Bitcoin and mine the Bitcoin, which bodes well for companies that are, you know, have facilities in the United States, which is most of the companies. You know, a lot of these companies have places all around the world, but there's a lot of companies that are heavily based in the U.S. Texas, there's a bunch of companies that are heavily based in Texas. We know in Georgia, CleanSpark is, you know, that's the center of their universe, although they've expanded into a bunch of other states and they continue to expand. And there's other countries as well that are trying to be Bitcoin friendly.
American Made said, who's all in on Bitcoin? I'm not.
All right, we'll end this poll because it's 50-50. I told you our polls seem to be 80-20 or 50-50. So there we go. Exactly 50-50. Who's going to blink first?
Wow, that's funny. You said it. It's either 80-20 or 50-50.
It's crazy. How are we going to phrase this?
Here's a question I have, Tom. Does anybody think you can just type yes or no in the chat. Does anybody think we will see 50,000 BTC ever again?
Oh, you want to do that poll?
No, you don't need to do a poll. You can just, people can type in yes or no. Yes, it will be 50,000 again, or no, it will never get down to 50,000 again. So that's basically a 50% decrease from here. That's an interesting one. I mean, it might touch it for a second, but I don't think it will ever get down and hover there again. I was hoping it would. Don't get me wrong.
I don't think we're going to see 50,000 again, but I could easily be wrong. There is like a touch point at like 49,000 that, you know, we could flash crash to. And I think that daily candle, like the last time it happened, I'll go to the one-day chart and look at that daily candle. The last time that happened, we got to go back in time. Right, this got down to 49,000. This was August 5th. This was panic day. There was a bunch of reasons, all of which turned out to be nonsense in hindsight. But the market panicked at an epic level on this day. So it was not just Bitcoin. The entire market crashed and recovered. But even on a day where this got down to 49,000, so this would qualify, George. This would be a day where it got down there. It closed at $54,000. So it closed up 5,000 in the same day. So that's a flash crash. And that's what I'm saying.
When was it?
That was August 5th, 2024. Okay. And that's not the first flash crash we've had. And you can see this one, you know, sometimes a flash crash is a precursor to bad things. But this time, you know, the next thing that happened was good. So I just don't see us getting down those. I mean, look how far you've got to scroll to get back down to that. And look at the lines of support that have held. This purple line at 74,000. You know, we crossed this in November of 2024. And, you know, we almost retested it 2 different days back in early April. And now we're, you know, $23,000, $24,000 above this line. And I just don't think, is it possible we go retest this line? I think it is. I think it's more likely that, in my opinion, that we will do retesting. So however high we go, I think we'll come back and retest one of these lines. But I think we're going to start seeing higher lows because I think we're out of this 3-month period that, or, you know, really more than 3 months, all the way back. You know, we haven't had bullish activity since back here, really. You know, if you just kind of do that, that's a long period of time where we did double top in that time and retrace over 30% move to the downside. Jeff, thank you for the super chat. Jeff said 53K to 57K is all but a lock for bear market floor. So he's locking it in a little bit above your 50, George.
Well, that's only 8 months, away. I mean, I think what could come out that might scare and spook people is maybe like somebody comes out and says, hey, they have proof that they actually made the coin and how it was made and what it was made for. Beta test coin.
What you're saying?
No, I'm saying something could spook it like that to bring it back down to 50. But it would have to be something crazy like that.
Anything can happen.
It's not going to be that thing. What was that guy's name?
Oh,
I forget his name.
See, he's already gone on to the ash heap of
Yeah.
history. But the guy who claimed he was Satoshi, and eventually they had to sue him, and he had to admit that. Steve Lucky is saying 69K will be around the bottom next bear market. And I do think that's a super strong line at 69. That was the peak of the previous bull market. So we have a lot of lines of strong support. But, you know, the world's a crazy place these days. So you can't really rule anything out. I think we are now in a bull market. I think we're starting to, the 3 or 4 month short-term bear market that we're in, and we're going to look at the 1 day and we're going to look at the 1 week, which we've been talking about for months on this channel, and it has been pretty much playing out the way that we expected. And I think it will keep doing that, which means we're most of the way through the bottoming out process, and we've entered the bull. We've exited this bearish trend, 3 or 4 month trend, and there's no doubt it was 3 or 4 months of bearish activity for Bitcoin. Remember, in 2024, a year where Bitcoin ended up 122%, we had 7 months in a row of bearish activity. That was unbearable. We've all forgotten that now, because what happened right after that 7 months is Bitcoin went absolutely ballistic. But that was a brutal, brutal time to go through, and this has been brutal. And for the Bitcoin miners, this 4 months is way worse than even that 7 months was. So this has been very tough. I understand why a lot of people have gone away altogether, or a lot of people are extremely, extremely skeptical that these stocks will ever be, you know, show their value, or that they even have any value. But I remain, I'm in the similar place to where I was. Things are not playing out identically to previous cycles. And I think that things have changed so dramatically, and everything is scaled up so dramatically, and what's coming next is so different than what's happened before, that I think we're going to have a less consistent 4-year cycle rotating around, whether it's the halving or the U.S. presidential election, which tends to happen shortly after the halving. But I do think Bitcoin is up and to the right, like gold has been for the last 2,000 years. And Sourmelon Gaming is saying 2023 was the only good year, and that time came and went fast. So 2023, to your point, this is what the Bitcoin miners did in 2023. So for those of you who think like these never do anything and they can never move, Bitcoin was up 154% in 2023. I'm not even going to talk about Core Scientific. If you bought in at the right time, you got that at 4 cents and you made a fortune. So even putting that as an exception. Thanks, Cypher 638%, Bit Digital 605%, Marathon, the largest one by market cap, up 587%. That was your 1 year 2023 return. So if you were dollar cost averaging correctly, you were back in the green by the end of 2023 on Marathon. Now, things have gone the other way since then. 2024, not as good. Half the stock's green, half the stock's red, and Marathon was red. But I believe, although 2025 has been a very tough, the first third of the year was ugly. But so I'm gonna go to the month of April, and let's revisit first what we've had to endure recently. This was February of 2025. I mean, this is just a nightmare. Bitcoin down 17%. Every single Bitcoin miner in the red. 2 of them outperforming Bitcoin, but you know, you've got miners down 1, 2, 3, 4 miners down in the neighborhood of 30% just in the month of February, and then a bunch in the 20s. So that was a train wreck. So what happens after this train wreck? We go right out of February into March, which is another train wreck. Not for Bitcoin. Bitcoin down only 2%, but the best Bitcoin miner in the month of March was down 16%. That after a month where everything just got crushed. Cypher down 44%. What was it down in February? Where's Cypher? Why am I not seeing? Was that Cypher? Yeah, Cypher. So Cypher down 29% in February and 44% in March. I mean, if you held Cypher, these were tough times. And the same thing for, Wolf, Core Scientific. But, however, after those two awful, awful months, I'm happy to report to you that this was April. So now, all of a sudden, this looks dramatically better than what we've been going through so far in 2025. Still not as good as it should be, I would add. But you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the Bitcoin miners outperforming Bitcoin. Bitcoin had a fantastic, one of its best months of all time, up 14%. And, you got Bitfarms, which has a long way to go because that fell so far, so fast. But it was up 26% in the month of April. Cypher was up 24%. Cleanspark was up 22%. Those are good months. Yeah, there was a couple that had bad months. TerraWolf was up 2%. Riot was up 2%. Iron was up 0%. And BitDigital was up down 4%. These are bad results. So we'll see where they go from here. But this is very, after February and March, I would think you could take a sigh of relief looking at this chart, looking at the month of April. What do you think, George?
I try not to think, Tom, because it gets me in trouble.
A sound policy.
It just makes me realize how much I'm down and how much it just hurts thinking about the history.
Well,
and how high we were and now, wow, you know what I mean?
Right, and you can see by just that brief history we just did, like 24 was tough and 25's been brutal. But to me, when I see a month like April, and now we come out of the gates in May with 2 good days in a row. So obviously it's very early in the month. You cannot extrapolate from 2 days, but if we can have, this is April, I think of the opposite of sell in May and go away. I think we're just getting to the good part here. So stay tuned. And then I can tell you, just from looking at, our numbers and everybody else's numbers, everybody's left this space. Everybody's, and, obviously thank all of you guys for being here. You haven't left. But the retail investors in general, I saved this article, I believe. If I can't find it, I'm not going to waste you guys' time. But basically, it said in the month of March, the whales were accumulating massively, and it said retail investors were fleeing, is the word that it used. So this is exactly what we warn about all the time on this channel. The fear, the overall market, the CNN Fear and Greed Index, spent a week at 3 or 4 on a scale from 1 to 100, 1 being extreme fear, 100 being extreme greed. It was at 3 or 4. It was the most historic to last that many days. There's only one other day in history that it's ever been lower than that. So, and there was no time where there was multiple days like that. So this was the most fear the market's ever had. And there's no reason for it. It was surrounding the tariffs. And yes, that created a lot of uncertainty in the market, but you can't sit here and tell me that it was the most devastating event to ever happen in the history of the market and that the fear and greed index deserved to be at 3 out of 100. By the way, we're a week and a half later, and it's at 43. We're practically neutral when a week and a half ago we were in the most fear the stock market has ever been in history. So that's when we talk about, hey, I know it hurts and it's hard, but this is when you buy. you buy in these, and it wasn't just this one signal. It was everything. There was only gloom and doom. And, let's go take a look at here was another gigantic buying signal. The VIX, the volatility index, got up to 60, which I think it's done 4 times in the last 30 years. So this was an epic, and so volatility obviously spikes when people are afraid, and the market is usually tanking as this goes up. So here we ran all the way up over 60, and we're back down to 22. We're practically back down to normal. To me, 35 is panic. So I have a line at 35. Whenever we get here, to me, it starts to really look like a good buying opportunity in general. You got to find the right stocks and do your due diligence. But, if I zoom out, this August 5th day I talked to you about, which is even more inexplicable, this got up over 60 again for no reason at all. And you got to go back, this was the global event that occurred in March of 2020 that we're not allowed to say. So, that obviously that was the biggest one. But, if I zoom out to the 1 week on this chart, you're going to see you just don't get this. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4 times. This is 2008. Right, that's as far back as this chart goes, 1990. So since they started doing this, this was one of the 4 biggest panics in the history of the stock market. So, if some much more quantifiable thing was happening, right? There's awful thing. I'll give you an example. We shut the world's economy down. Right? The supply chain broke. We shut the world's economy down. In this country, everybody had to go home. Almost all businesses, other than what was considered, quote, essential businesses, had to close for months, some of them for years. That's the level of type of panic that we were at this time. But there was nothing that justified that, in my opinion, other than hysteria, and hysteria created by big money to take small money, right? Because we get now, once April came out, it talked about how in March, the whales were accumulating and retail investors were fleeing the market.
Has anybody in the audience, worked at a hedge fund? Because I want to know how deep they do their research. Like, for an example, everybody's talking about, Ty was talking about BlackRock increased their holdings in CleanSpark 107%. I wonder if they do like a thesis of where they're going to sell now. Like they're going to sell, so many shares this day, or how do they, do their decision making? Or is it all done through Aladdin? That's my question. Do you know, Tom?
I mean, no. Only unless you're sitting at one of those trading desks, at BlackRock, do you know the answer to that question? But they're clearly accumulating. BlackRock and Vanguard are the largest owners in Riot, in Marathon, in CleanSpark. They're starting to accumulate a lot of the other Bitcoin mining companies. Some of them they haven't even started on yet. So, but BlackRock and Vanguard are the number 1 and 2 holders of 75% of all companies out there in the U.S. markets. But they've clearly adopted the larger Bitcoin miners. They have big stakes in.
Yeah, but I would imagine they've reduced their position in Rivian.
You would think so, but I don't know.
Listen, I don't want bad things to happen to Rivian. I just don't think it's as good an investment. That's one of the reasons why I haven't lost hope in the Bitcoin miners, is when you look at what the EV sector got up to, and we all knew, well, some of us knew that, it was fool's gold over there.
Right. And but that's a classic, that's a great, and we've talked about this. Most of my EV watch list, those companies are now out of business. Much more than half of my 2020 EV watch list that I created, way more than half of those companies no longer exist. The rest of them, other than Tesla being the outlier, which was bigger than all the rest of them by many, many, many multiples. Other than Tesla, all those stocks are down 80, 90, 95%, 99%, the ones that are still around. And most of those companies didn't even have a car that worked. Some of them had a working prototype. Some of them had stuff on the drawing board. There were 4 or 5 different charging station companies. Like the adoption just didn't happen the way they expected it. And what's worse than that is competitors got in against this, especially those charging stations, right? Tesla has their own chargers. Everybody's making their charger Tesla compatible. The big auto companies are going to roll out their cars, and they're going to roll out the charging stations with them. And we're not going to, in the United States anyway, and I know this is different for every country in the world, has a different equation on how many electric vehicles it makes sense for them to have. There are some countries where, based on population density and availability to different sources of energy, it makes an extreme amount of sense to go to electric vehicles. There's other countries where it's just the equation, it's pure stupidity to go to electric vehicles. So, it's going to run the spectrum like that. And unfortunately, the vast majority of we have some large population centers. We have some big cities, but the United States is sprawled out. And that's not what EVs are made for, right? Most of this country is a lower population density. Now, is there going to be a scenario where, in the 20 biggest cities, it makes perfect sense to switch over to EV and EV ends up dominating in those areas? That's what I think the future holds. And I really think it won't even be straight up EVs. I think it's going to be hybrids. And Larry's saying Tesla's looking at hydrogen. I had a basket of hydrogen stocks, and that would be the ultimate. I just feel like it's one of those. Everything is so much further away than we think it is. Everything takes so much longer to get to than we think. Someday, if they can get hydrogen right, it's so vastly superior to electric vehicles. It's ludicrous. But, it's very hard to scale, right? Because there's a lot of infrastructure involved, and so they're not there yet, and there's things ahead of it in line. So I do think, maybe 50 years from now, everything's hydrogen. But I don't. 10 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised if still nothing is. Let's see how our poll is doing. Do you plan on buying more Bitcoin miner stock in 2025? Here we got a 60-40. So 60% are saying no. They're done buying Bitcoin miner stocks, which is the takeaway that I have from that is, remember, this audience is skewed towards Bitcoin and Bitcoin miner stocks. So even 60% of this audience is saying, you know what? I'm done buying Bitcoin miners. So you can see there's not a lot of buying pressure. I want to go to one company and let me find. Oh, on a side note, Microsoft knocked it out of the park. They're up 11% this week, and 9% of that was on the day they reported earnings. They surpassed Apple as the largest market cap company in the world. And Microsoft for decades was the largest market cap company in the world, and Apple have been trading. And I do think there was 1 or 2 or 3 days in the middle where NVIDIA passed both of them and then pulled back. But, so Microsoft, in the middle of everybody else panicking, they beat top line, they beat the bottom line. Their forecast was that just it's all good things ahead, and their stock, a 9% move on a $3 trillion stock. That's a lot. That's a gigantic move. So that's just an aside. What I was really here to show you is there's some of these companies, Bitfarms in particular. If you go here and look, average volume, 24 million shares. Today, just under 7 million. There's just a lack of buyers for Bitfarm at this price right now. I think they have to spend some time. They got so low. And if we look at even just the 1 month, you'll see, they were down to 67.5 cents on April 8th. So, that run from 67 cents to $1, I think knocked the steam out of the buyers. And it's going to have to consolidate here for a little while because this is crazy low volume. And it's not because it was a low volume day, because if I go to Marathon, average volume 38 million, today 56 million. If I go to Riot, average volume 26 million, they had double that today, 52 million. So if anything, it was a higher than average volume day for a lot of these companies. We'll look at CleanSpark as well. This was almost right on, 24.9, and they were at 22.3. So you can see there was just a lack of buyers for Bitfarms today. And that is not the first time that's happened. So that's one of the hurdles they're going to have to jump through. I would have thought getting over $1 would have actually helped that, but it seems like they're going to need to consolidate for a little while before they make the next move up. We'll see what happens. Let's see what's happening with Bitcoin. So we're very steady here. We're still just under $97,000 for Bitcoin. Should we end this poll? 57% now to 43%. So I'm going to end that. We'll get the next poll going. And I'm just going to read Christian, who is a member, so I appreciate that, Christian. And he's giving a sentiment that a lot of people have. He said, Tom, by the time these miners move, the next halving is upon them. These businesses are cooked. So I think you got to really do your due diligence, because although these are all Bitcoin miners, the 10 that we're now whittled down to are very 10 different business models, some of which I think are going to have great success, some of which are very contingent on how much of this high performance computing demand is real and how many contracts they get. But the companies that are performing well, the companies that are highly efficient, the companies that get the most per exahash out of what they're doing, that are reducing the joules per terahash in their fleet. There's a lot of companies that are in really good shape. And in addition to that, they kind of quadrupled down in this 4-year cycle by building a massive amount of infrastructure. I mean, tenfold most of these companies what they were in the last iteration, in the last 4-year cycle. Some of them even much more than that. So Marathon went at one point, they got down to 1 exahash, and now they're in the mid 50s. So they're over 50 times larger than they were. And CleanSpark, I can remember when they were under 1 exahash, and they're at 40. Iron went from 3. They claim they're going to be at 50 next month. So the run from 3 to 50. They're not going to have to do that every single, right? That's like the run from 50 to 10,000. They're not going to be at 10,000 exahash next cycle. The network is going to grow slower. It is growing, and I'll go show you what I'm talking about on that one. I think I have that open. So it looks like we're almost at the very end to the next difficulty level adjustment. This has been consistently somewhere between 4.5% and 5% down all month. So it looks like we're going to have a 4 or 5% decrease. That'll put us somewhere around 117. We came into the year at 110. So you're talking about being 4.5 months, more than a third of the way into the year, and the network's up maybe 7%. The network, a couple of years ago, it was up 100%. Last year, it was up 54%. This year, it's going to be up considerably less than that, in my opinion. And the amount that it is growing, it's a lot of the publicly traded Bitcoin miners that are making the big leaps and bounds in exahash. So, as they get a bigger percentage of the piece of the pie, I think some of that bodes better than people think for these Bitcoin miners, in addition to the fact that these machines keep getting more and more energy efficient. I'm going to go to what Riot showed, because everybody thinks all these companies lose money mining Bitcoin. And let's just go to the real numbers here. Riot just put out their quarterly numbers.
Found a way to do show prep late at night, all alone, in our group.
I see George and I hear George, but I
Oh,
don't
you
see him
can't
talking.
hear me?
I hear you now.
Oh, I'm just sitting here.
Were you gone, or was it just me?
No, I went to the little boy's room.
I gotcha. All right, so just quickly, Riot put out their quarterly report, May 1st, yesterday. And I just want to go through a few things. 161 million of total revenue. So if you look, total revenue of $161 million as compared to 79 million in the same period last year. So, that's a double on revenue. But I want to go down. That's not the numbers I was looking for. There's two different things I was hoping to show you guys. I'll find them quickly. Okay. Production of 1,530 Bitcoin. Now, in the first quarter of 2024, we were pre-halving, so the reward was double, and the difficulty level was significantly lower than it was right now. So with those two massive roadblocks in the way, Riot actually produced more Bitcoin. All 3 months of this quarter were post-halving. So the reward was half, but they increased the number of Bitcoin that they mined. They went from 1,364 Bitcoin to 1,530 Bitcoin. This is what Bitcoin miners were talking about doing. Most people didn't believe they'd be able to do it, but they're mining more Bitcoin after the halving than they were before the halving. So this is where I'm saying they double, triple, quadruple down to make sure they got ahead of the curve, and they're not going to have to spend like this on the next halving. Yes, there will be capital expenditures. This is a capital intensive industry, but it will be a small fraction of what it was this time, and it will be an even smaller fraction of what the market cap of these companies are, in my opinion, the next time around. The other numbers I wanted to show you guys, because they just, you don't have to guess, they tell you. So production value of Bitcoin in this quarter, they averaged $93,000 per Bitcoin of revenue. Cost to mine a Bitcoin excluding depreciation. So that's just excluding depreciation. That's not all non-cash costs. That's not EBITDA. That's $43,800. So you can see there's a massive amount of room in there. But even if you go cost to mine Bitcoin, including the Bitcoin miner depreciation, so this is the all-in cost, they're at $81,000 versus $93,000. They have positive EBITDA. Now, where they really got whacked in this quarter is, I don't know if it's here. I think I have it in the next sheet. $208 million hit they took because at the end of the quarter, Bitcoin was worth less than it was on December 31st. So, when Bitcoin goes up, that's great news for these because you can see this is operating income and loss. The change in their value of their Bitcoin is in operating income. So when Bitcoin goes up, that's a big boom for them. But when it goes down, they lost $250,000 this quarter. But you can see it's mostly the decrease in the value of their Bitcoin. And now if Bitcoin runs, they're going to get to take all that back as, an increase. And I think most of us think Bitcoin will be at somewhere between higher numbers and much higher numbers. Because remember, this March, where were we on March 31st? Let's go. On March 31st, we were at $82,000. So we're already at $97,000, which means the 20,000 Bitcoin that they have, right? 97 minus 82 is 15. 20,000 Bitcoin times $15,000. They're up $300 million. So, if we go up from here, their next report is going to be huge. Now, that's all non-cash because they're hodling that Bitcoin. But eventually, you hope there's a payday at the end of that. I think these companies hope that Bitcoin's going to continue to go up forever. They would love to have those 20,000. If they could keep those 20,000 Bitcoin and someday they're worth $1 million each, right? Then what's this company's market cap going to be? And that's kind of the long-term thesis. Now, I understand the massive volatility really makes you want to at least long-term swing trade, if not short-term swing trade, because there's wild volatility in these stocks. But I think the fact that everybody has counted them as left for dead, and by the way, Riot is by far not the cheapest cost per coin. There's several other companies that produce coins for less than that and have depreciation of less than that. So there's other companies that are even much more profitable than Riot. Some are worse. And I know there will be a forever ongoing debate MicroStrategy versus the Bitcoin miners, and I see that happening in the chat. And listen, I sold my MicroStrategy and bought some Bitcoin miners, and I'll tell you why. It's not because, and I said it's not because I dislike MicroStrategy and I think they're going to do poorly. They've dramatically outperformed the Bitcoin miners in the first part of this run. So I think the Bitcoin miners are due for a bigger run up right now to catch up. And that's just my personal opinion because some of them have lagged so far behind that it's crazy. And if you go to...
What's has anybody figured out like their operating cost per coin of what they hold, or is it so incidental it doesn't even matter?
MicroStrategy?
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically zero. They have a underlying business that breaks even. That's, it was always had about a $1 billion market cap. And they just bought, what's the overhead on just pressing the button to buy a Bitcoin?
Right, I gotcha.
That's pretty much it. Their theory is that's not fair because they do have to do at the market offerings and preferred stock. So there's a lot of legal fees and that kind of stuff. So though it's a fair point, George, there is some cost to that. But, their hope is that with the strike points they're selling their stock at, Bitcoin's going to be worth so much more than the dilution they're doing that, this is going to end up being a big win. And I think they're probably right about that.
Well, don't you think at some point in time it's going to become equal or very close to, that there's not going to be a multiplier? Or is there always going to be a multiplier? Because that's what doesn't make sense to me on MicroStrategy. I'm going to be honest.
Here's the question that I ask myself with MicroStrategy. If they just stop doing everything right now and just rode the wave from here until 2030, right? I think they have, they're about they're trading at about 2x their Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin 2x's, then they win. Now, I think Bitcoin's going to do a lot more than 2x. Bitcoin could 10x in that period of time. And then they win huge. Now, they're also probably going to be issuing more stock, restructuring that debt. They're going to have to continuously restructure debt and issue new shares of stock because they are not selling their Bitcoin. So debt and equity are their only two sources of funds. So, at some point, they have a massive amount of debt and convertible debt and stock dilution. So, but the trade-off, you hope, especially with the convertible debt, is that, Bitcoin dramatically outpaces.
See, I guess and by the way, it's Edmund, it's me, George, who doesn't really understand MicroStrategy. What is the benefit of me going and buying MicroStrategy versus going and buying Bitcoin? Why wouldn't I just go? That's why I could never understand.
I agree.
Well, I mean, you know what I mean? Why wouldn't I just go buy Bitcoin? At least it's, a stored of value versus MicroStrategy, which, it's a stored of value too, but then there's a whole bunch of, financial statements I need to understand.
What MicroStrategy is hoping by borrowing money is that they're leveraging themselves and they'll have a lot more Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's going to go up a lot more. So investing in their vehicle is going to be better than investing directly in Bitcoin. That may end up being true. It may not. I have MicroStrategy to 20K telling me I don't understand MicroStrategy.
I think he was saying that to me.
No, he said, Tom, no disrespect, you don't understand MicroStrategy. So, okay. I mean, maybe I don't.
No, I mean, that's the reason why. And Christian, I agree with you about miners too, Bitcoin miners. If I would have known that I was going to get destroyed like I did, I would have just stayed in Bitcoin. I would be a very happy man right now too.
You changed your philosophy. You
I know
really
I did.
started.
Now my extra money went into Bitcoin.
Right. You bought
and a little bit of XRP.
Right. And you have large positions in both of those. So we'll see. And again, I'm not bashing MicroStrategy. I think it's going to go up. I think it's going to go up over time. I think it's going to be, there's value there. I just think when 2025 is done, and I'll show you the chart that I'm looking at, and it's, again, it's never just one thing, but.
Is that true? MicroStrategy buys $2 worth of Bitcoin for every $1 dilution.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think that could be true.
If you, however much money you get from dilution, you're buying Bitcoin at its retail value. So it's dollar for dollar. Now, if you forecast out that dilution, if it's an at the market offering, it's just straight up dollar for dollar, period, because the people are getting the stock right now today. But if it's convertible debt where the strike point, the conversion point is much higher, then you're getting that leverage that you hope, as long as Bitcoin does what it's supposed to do. So it depends how they get their money. But from, just from an at the market offering, a dollar is a dollar is a dollar is a dollar.
So I have a question. Could Trump, because he wants to make, Bitcoin, like the United States, he wants to make the, dominate in the Bitcoin, could he actually do some type of formal relationship with money guaranteed to these Bitcoin miners that could make them pop for their infrastructure? Maybe give them like an electric credit or something like that.
Well, there could be a tax credit for buying Bitcoin mining machines. There could be.
I have a feeling that's coming.
There could be. There already is, energy credit, because a lot of these Bitcoin mining companies now have their own energy that they can sell instead of mine Bitcoin with. there's always that part of the equation. And this happens in Texas on a regular basis, when the grid is tested, the price of energy spikes and Riot just turns all their machines off because they're getting 2 or 3 times as much money selling the energy as they do, using it to mine Bitcoin. So it's a benefit to the grid, because without all that extra energy, the grid would fail. So there's a positive symbiotic relationship that the Bitcoin mining can reach with the grid in not just the US, but all around the world.
And Ty, I think I understand the importance of Bitcoin equals power. I was actually talking about this, and I don't know if it happened in my generation or my age. I'm 55. I don't know if it'll happen in the next 30 years. But I think Bitcoin's going to represent 2 things, actually. One is, I think it's going to represent your own little ecosystem for the economy. I think because of the 100 million Satoshis, you're going to be like, maybe not me, but maybe my kids are going to be like in charge of this little ecosystem of this economy. And the other thing that people don't talk about Bitcoin is that the scarcity level is just going to make it so you're a person of like statue if you have a Bitcoin. And I think that's what's going to really happen with Bitcoin. I think anybody in their 20s and 30s should realize that that's what Bitcoin's going to represent at some point in time, which is crazy.
Well, you touched on a big thing. The scarcity of Bitcoin is going to become more and more important, because remember, still, like we talked about, the vast majority of pools of money in the world have not even bought their first penny worth of Bitcoin. And if they haven't bought Bitcoin, they sure as heck haven't been buying the altcoins. So we're at the very beginning of adoption here, and there is only going to be 21 million Bitcoin, and we think already 4 or 5 of those million are gone forever. So you're talking about 16 or 17 million Bitcoin maybe when it's all said and done with. You've got, Satoshi's got 1 million of them that are probably gone forever. And, so this is a very, the supply demand equation on Bitcoin that will spiral, and that's what's going to cause the increase.
Well, that's what's going to get the God candle. And I remember, I've already, in case anybody, joining in for the first time, I think the God candle is going to happen after the next halving.
So you think we're still several years away from
a God candle? Yeah. But I mean, if it doubles, that's a God candle, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, we've had a mission. We've never failed, but it looks like today we're in deep trouble. We got 66 likes.
Oh my goodness.
If you're here, if you're willing.
And this has been a weak stream. Just a lot of people going out getting drunk already.
I think the thing is, we just looked at the month of April was very good. This week was very good, but people have checked out and they don't believe it yet, and they're just gone. And I mean, I look at the comments section is full of people saying the Bitcoin miners are scam artists. I don't see any hope for the Bitcoin miners. I mean, guys,
just, I would be out, but I went to such an uncomfortable level. It's like, it's going to go to 0 before I'm out. You know what I mean? It's just like, I've kissed that money goodbye now. I'm like,
you're in too deep.
Yeah.
You're pot committed.
I do have it out. And if I do go up, if it goes up 40%, I might do long-term options and get out. Because my goal this year is I don't want to owe anybody anything after this year. Not a penny to anybody. Got a little sloppy.
Robert Anderson said, hit the like button. Yes, thank you, please. Sour Melon Gaming, not a fan of
what's their cost per coin right now, Edmund? What are they, around 50, 40?
Whose cost per coin?
MicroStrategy.
No, it's like, I think in the high 60s.
Oh, is it?
Well, let's see. I may have a. So
I just hope that Marathon at some point in time gets their lick like MicroStrategy did.
and I think they will, because Marathon has more, things going for it than MicroStrategy. Now, MicroStrategy is 10x the size of Marathon in their Bitcoin stack. So let's just look and see. Strategy purchased 15,355 Bitcoin over the past week, and this came out on April 28th. So last week, they bought over 15,000 Bitcoin. They now have 553,555 Bitcoin. That's worth $52 billion with the price over just 95,000. So it's a few days later, and we're a little bit higher than that, but somewhere they should tell us. So these purchases averaged 92,000, but their cost is much lower than that. So they're at $64,400 cost per Bitcoin if you average all the Bitcoin that they bought since day one.
Oh, is it 62,000?
64,000.
64. Okay. They're in a little better position than me, not much.
Yeah, and I mean they upped their game drastically in the last year. So most of the Bitcoin they own, they bought in the last year. Having said that, they were by far the biggest holder of Bitcoin by far, even prior to that. So
Have you ever listened to Saylor talk about why he got into Bitcoin?
I mean, I've heard him talk. I'm not sure.
And about how he had nothing really going on.
Well,
it's an interesting listening to him talk. I thought it was really amazing.
Alexander saying the first day MicroStrategy announces selling one Bitcoin, the pyramid scheme will fall right away.
But his intentions are never to sell.
Yeah, I think we're 20 or 30 years away from them ever even thinking about selling a Bitcoin.
Well, I have a question.
This is their business model.
Let's go 4 years in the future, and let's say there's a Democrat that's running the United States again. Could they come back and say, yeah, we're going to change, no publicly traded company can own Bitcoin? Could they do that?
That would be, I mean, they would have to get that through. Could they do it? And yes, okay. I would put the chances as, approaching zero that they would do that. Can't say zero. But
no, I was just thinking because you remember how much Biden didn't like cryptocurrency.
By the time we have a next presidential election, you want to lose the election, tell people you're going to, do bad things to cryptocurrency. Because if you think we have adoption now, wait till 4 years from now.
No, I'm just curious. I mean, these are the things that I think of at night when I go to bed.
Even in this cycle, in the months leading up to the election, the Democratic Party got much more cryptocurrency friendly. So, it's clear which way the wind is blowing, regardless of whether it's a Democrat or a Republican in the next round, in my opinion. A couple other things we haven't talked about to get to real quickly. The jobs number came out. It was a beat. So everybody worried that, this was going to be a disaster. It was the opposite. They were anticipating 138,000 new jobs. They got 177,000. The one caution I will put on that is within the margin of error of the adjustments that they make on this. So they could easily come back next month and say it was exactly the 138,000 that they thought it was. So, but for the time being, this is the number they're putting. And that changed. So now everybody thinks the Fed's going to wait even longer to raise rates because they're, you know, with if the job market is strong, then in their mind, there's no reason to raise rates, which is incorrect in my opinion, but that's their mindset. So if you look at the CME futures on what's being priced in, one rate cut just got cut out because of this job report right here.
Well, I told you I only thought there'd be 2, so.
Well, and the thing is, we get data points, and every time we get one, it changes. So, we got to wait and see, what happens as time goes on.
You said there was something that I've been talking about.
Oh, yes. Let me do this real quick, and then I'll get to that.
Okay.
SEC along the lines of the U.S. government becoming significantly more Bitcoin and cryptocurrency friendly. This article came out yesterday. SEC ditches PayPal's PYUSD probe, removing key regulatory hurdle for its stablecoin. The SEC subpoenaed PayPal in late 2023 over its dollar-backed stablecoin. The SEC said it has concluded its investigation into PayPal's stablecoin and would not take any enforcement actions. So this is yet another one of their lawsuits or pursuits that they are abandoning. The SEC in particular was very hostile towards cryptocurrency, and Gary Gensler's gone and was the new sheriff in town, and this is now a crypto friendly SEC. There's just no doubt about it. And by the way, if they get this thing onto the market, the stablecoin market is growing, with PayPal offering a 3.7% yield to make it more attractive to users. So, rather than have cash in the bank, whatever you're getting on your cash, they're giving a 3.7% yield to hold their stablecoin.
That's terrible. I think Coinbase is at almost 5%. It's 4 something.
Well, that is terrible. They should certainly at least be keeping up with Coinbase.
Yeah. Because I'm always keeping cash. It does make me nervous, but I look at Coinbase as just a bank. I mean, it has crypto. To me, the reason I like all the different cryptos is it's kind of like your own Forex account. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and crypto is like part bank, it's part investment broker, Coinbase is a gigantic publicly traded company. They're one of the biggest exchanges in the world. How
many billions are they? What's their market cap? Are they over 100 billion?
Let's find out right now what their market cap is. $52 billion.
Wow. I would think they'd be a lot bigger.
Well, they're at $204. They did get up to, it looks like, $349.75 was their all-time high, and that was just 5 months ago. So we'll see. But business is picking up.
Hey, Tom, if next month the United States announced that they're going to make BTC, they're going to do their purchases and all that, how quickly does Apple jump in and start buying?
Apple needs to do something, because while MicroStrategy and Apple, I think, had a good earnings report, but they pulled back a little bit.
I mean, can you imagine if they would have got in earlier?
I don't understand. The companies like Microsoft and Apple throwing $2 billion into Bitcoin is immaterial to them. It's if it went to zero, it would make no difference in the performance of their company, the price of their stock, nothing. So why they are not in that is baffling to me. And somebody's got to lead the way. They're all afraid to be the first.
Well, I thought Microsoft was buying some. I thought, remember, Saylor went over and had this big powwow with him.
He made a heavy sales pitch, and I think
they still said no.
They said no. Now Tesla owns around 11,500 Bitcoin. So they got a stack. They're, other than the Bitcoin miners, they have the biggest stack. And it's really nobody else. So there's nobody's willing. But this is here's another multi-trillion dollars pools. Each one of these is a $3 trillion company. Once somebody breaks the ice, then everyone's going to be in. So who knows when that is? It could be this year. It could be next year. It's not going to be 5 years from now. There is no way with the ETFs having the gigantic success. The two most successful ETFs in history are both Bitcoin ETFs, and they're even the one that's in a distant second place would be in first place by a mile compared to every other ETF that's ever come out. So, like, adoption's happening, and it's only a matter of time. A lot of these companies, Apple and Microsoft are the kind of companies that can have, anywhere from 50 to 100 to 150 billion dollars sitting on the sidelines at any given time. Apple gives monumental dividends back, and Microsoft as well. But, like I said, $1 or $2 billion. I think it's almost ridiculous that they haven't done that.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, think of all the upside that they lost too.
Right. They could have done this they could have done this at Bitcoin 15,000.
Yeah. I wonder if they were told not to. I wonder if they all personally hold it. You know what I mean? Because that's how money really works. All the CEOs could be sitting on, 5K, 10K, 20K. And when they really want it to pop, they're going to announce it, then that's when they're going to sell.
Well, that just means it's a catalyst coming.
Yeah. And that's what I think really has happened. I bet you, if you look back, I mean, that's probably,
I'm trying to find your story, George, before we.
Thanks, Larry.
Before I get to that, this is a quick story. BitDigital. So I've been talking about BitDigital for a long time that, their Bitcoin mining operations are dwindling severely. And at this point, they no longer put out a monthly operational report. When they did, the last information they gave us, if I go backwards in time here, the last information they gave us was in January, they mined 28.7 Bitcoin. So, I mean, when you've got companies mining 500, 600, 700 Bitcoin, this is a miscellaneous amount. And now they're not telling us at all anymore. And now the last straw is this. I had this highlighted. What did I do with it? Give me 30 seconds. Our business. So this is in their prospectus. This is how BitDigital describes their business. It's one line. BitDigital, or the company, is a global platform for high-performance computing infrastructure and digital asset production. With headquarters in New York City, the company's high-performance computing business operates under the White Fiber brand, so they've rebranded themselves as White Fiber. Our operations are located in the U.S., Canada, and Iceland. So, I mean, you can see they're not even. They give a brief mention later on down to Bitcoin mining, but this is just, and by the way, at $300 million market cap, this is a prospectus for a $500 million at the market offering. So for those of you afraid of dilution, like that's over 100% stock dilution. And it doesn't look like they intend to spend it on Bitcoin mining. If I can't find this, I'll give up. But I did want to find that. Here we go. Shaw Walters. Quote, "We're going to automate all of the jobs." So this is what he said. "Someday you'll be out of a job. So will I. So will your neighbor. So will your best friend. And so will all of your family. All of our jobs will be automated thanks to AI. This is the prediction of Shaw Walters, founder of Elijah Labs and creator of Elijah OS. Thoughts, George?
That's scary. It's kind of like the self-driving car. Plausible, probably won't ever happen though.
This is right. You know, you've been talking about people losing jobs to AI. This
The
guy's
majority of people are going to lose their jobs, but when you use the word all, that doesn't ever happen. You can't use the word all. You can say most, but you can't say all.
I'm on board. I agree with that take completely. He says, quote, "We're going to automate all of the jobs, like all of the jobs are going to be automated. There aren't going to be any jobs." And there shouldn't be, according to him.
I would say most, but you still, here's why this is a fallacy. Is people still like human interaction at restaurants. People still like the experience of humans. And I don't think that's going away in the next 100 years.
Right. They've managed to already start to creep in some hybrid stuff. You can pay with the machine on the table and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't think people want to walk into a sterile environment where there's not a human being you can interface with and order your food. And that's just, one example. Who's going to cook the food?
There's another job, and it's the oldest profession in the world. Okay? And I don't see that ever going away. And that's a job.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
That's a job. And I mean, it might be reduced down quite a bit, but as long as people have money, they're always going to be paying for it. And so I don't think that's going away. I hate to go to those extreme examples, but those are very accurate points that they're not going away. It's not going to happen.
I just think we're getting way out over our skis talking about
you talk about
all
singing, don't you always think there's going to be singers, professional singers?
What scares me, yes, I do, but I will tell you, I have a buddy that spends a lot of time on this, and he'll play me two songs, and I can't tell which one the computer made. One of them, it's not even a human being at all. Not the lyrics, not the music, nothing, not the voice, and I can't tell. So that is a little scary.
But my whole thing is this, though, is that you still are going to have somebody singing at a concert.
I agree. There's nothing, right. There's no replacement for live music. It's an experience. We still want to have experiences and interact with other human beings.
And someone is still going to want to buy their pot from somebody else.
They'll just get it at the dispensary.
No, I'm serious. You know, when people get baked, they're like, oh man, he sells the best weed, man. You know what I mean? This is the best, man. Tom couldn't make an all-nighter stream.
Yeah,
And
no,
I mean, what else is there? I mean, there's just so many things. And how are you gonna, you know, I mean, again, you know, you can reduce your staff on a jet, but I mean, you're still gonna want somebody, right?
I would not go on a jet that had 0 pilots.
Right. I mean, but that's, you know, and then the other thing is, what about boats? You know, I mean, there's just so many industries that I just cannot use the word all. I can use the word most, and I will concur most, but I can't use the word all.
And I would go one step lower than most. I think a lot. There's going to be a lot of jobs that are lost to robots and AI.
You think it goes a lot and then most, then all?
Yes.
I think it goes most, then a lot.
Like a lot could be 30%. If 30% of the jobs disappeared, that'd be a lot. That'd be a, you know, think of the unemployment. Think about the unemployment. I mean, this person's proposing nobody works. How does anybody live?
Well,
where's the money come from?
Isn't 51% most?
It's a majority.
So that's most.
Yeah.
Well, it depends what is, Tom.
That's right. Well, we're not going to get
We're not going to do it the first time in like 3 years.
It's unbelievable. So this is, mark the date. This is the low point for the crypto miners is today.
Today. May 1st plus a day. Oh, yes. May Day plus a day.
That's it. But
all right. Well, hey, it's great talking to you, Tom, and everybody else. It was fun. Sorry, I don't understand MicroStrategy. I'll just buy Bitcoin.
Yes, thank you, George, and thanks everybody for joining us. I know it's well, it was a good week this week for once. So hopefully you guys are hanging in there and keep the debate going. Listen, the more everybody talks and argues about this stuff, the better we all understand it. So
yeah, I agree.
Discussion is welcome.
What does it go? I think it goes, not my keys, not my coins.
That's right.
So
go Bitcoin, go Bills. Is it too soon for that?
Yeah, it is.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.